I'm very much an advocate of back of napkin calculations when you're dealing with businesses, because there are so many variables, so much unknowns, and we're just not good at. I think if you try and quantify the complexity, you just end up making mistakes. There's a good saying that it's better to have an approximate answer to the right question than an exact answer to the wrong question.
Hector Hughes from a brilliant business called Unplugged. You came back from the Himalayas, you were inspired by this notion of locking your phones away. Why this business model?
One of the big insights.
Welcome to Founder Metrics by Vested, the podcast where we dive into the world of hotshot business leaders and the metrics that drive their game-changing companies forward. I'm your host, Ifti Nasser, CEO and founder of Vested. Hi, welcome to Founder Metrics. I'm Ifti. Today we've got Hector Hughes with us from a brilliant business called Unplugged. I'll let Hector give us more of an insight onto the business, and then we'll jump into the questions.
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Hector, one of the co-founders of Unplugged, and came to Unplugged in 2019, just off the back of 3 years as an executive at a tech startup. It was iPad till system, so very different, but great journey, but just managed to, got a bit kind of burnt out and just dissatisfied with life by the end of that. So that led me to a silent retreat in the Himalayas in 2019. And then a week after that, quit my job, very cliche, and ended up starting Unplugged. And what Unplugged is, we provide digital detoxes at cabins an hour from city life. So we have 20 cabins across the UK now, launched about 3 years ago, which was just after the first pandemic, which was an interesting time to launch. And going from strength to strength feels like, as you know, these things are a journey. Yeah, but feels like we're getting somewhere.
Well, let's kick off at the start of that journey. And you've already mentioned about the burnout. You want to give us a little bit of a walk up to that burnout and just what happened?
Yeah, well, I think if anything, it was a wider kind of dissatisfaction with life. So spent 3 years at this startup, joined as employee number 2 on the commercial side. Employee number 1 is my now co-founder, Ben. So that's when we met. And it was great fun. We did the whole high growth, international expansions over 3 years. I did a whole bunch of roles. I did sales for a year, ran product for a year, ran growth for a year. Wasn't very good at any of them, which was part of the reason probably for growing dissatisfied with it. But I think by that stage, as with many of these startups, was a bit of a mess behind the scenes. We did a lot right, but did many things wrong as well. And I think I just didn't I didn't feel like it was exciting me anymore. And same with life, I was kind of going out a lot at that time. I just felt very busy, and was very aware of the time I was spending on my phone, was flying around the world to set up these offices. And I just think I lost my joy for life, really. I just woke up one day and thought, what am I doing? And then a friend of mine recommended this silent retreat in the Himalayas. And I initially laughed that off. I thought, I can't do a silent retreat. Like, what will the guys at work think? And then eventually I was like, no, may as well give it a go. So flew out there. It was this...
Where was it in the Himalayas? Because it's a big place.
Yeah, it's a big place. Yeah, so northern India, just outside of Dharamshala, which is where the Dalai Lama lives. So we went down to see him one of the days, not personally, but to one of his big events. And it was this Buddhist temple on top of a mountain, so very picturesque. But the best thing about it is when you get there, they take your phone off you, and you just spend 10 days cut off from the outside world.
I'm not going to name drop, but I have met the Dalai Lama.
There you go. It's quite a name drop.
So, it sounds really simple. You're going to take your phone off you, you're going to do some meditation and detoxing. There must be more to it than that.
Well, there's not really. So I think the thing is, like, it's very simple. We always say, like, why don't people just go and stay in a hotel and they put their phone in the drawer? They could, but they don't. Like, that's the thing. Like, most people probably haven't spent a day in the last decade off their phones, and it's only when you take the phone away that you realize what we're missing. So, from first thing in the morning to the last thing at night, we're constantly checking our phones. And when you check your phone, it takes about 15 minutes to kind of regain composure afterwards. And for most of us, we never leave a 15-minute gap. So you're basically spending all day in this state of distraction. We were talking just before recording about how, as business owners, you can just spend all day switching between various messaging platforms, kind of, looking at what's happening. And what that what happens then is you're just living in this constant state of overstimulation. There we go, exactly.
I'm just have to turn this. I thought.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be able to.
No problem.
But I thought it.
So we're living in this constant state of overstimulation. Is when you get off your phone. So what happens? What we see is for the first 24 hours after people get off their phones, so we do it for 3 nights.
Yeah.
And for the first day, you're actually a bit more anxious, because you kind of feel like you've lost a limb, and then you just access this deep sense of calm that we're not used to. But that's actually how we're built to operate. We're not built to operate in this constant state of overstimulation, and that is where so much of the stress and anxiety in society we have today comes from. So really, all we're doing is taking that stimulation away in nature. So you've got the beautiful setting. Cabins are great because A, it's everything you need. B, they're sexy. So people see a beautiful cabin, they want to come and do it, and that's important because ironically, our marketing is through social media. You've got to kind of go to where people are for these things. So that's it. And really, we are an experience company. If anything, we're almost a behavioral psychology company where it's all about how can we actually get you to go and spend 3 nights off your phone, and then
come back to the business side of it and the business model, because it'll be really interesting to hear. But that notion, going back to the piece about not, when you put the phone down, that has become part of the communication. That's how, if there's an emergency, that's how you found out about it. If somebody needs to your input on something, that's where you find out about it. So those emergencies aren't going to not happen. Those inputs are not going to not need to be done. So how do you balance that in the conversation that you have with the folk using the? Yeah,
for sure. Well, I think, look, first of all, it's never as urgent as we think it is. So I think we're far too reachable today, and there's that just expectation that you need input on everything. So the first thing I would say is to consider just how we can not need to be as reachable. Obviously, sometimes there are emergencies that in this day and age, it's just unacceptable for us not to be contacted. We have a Nokia in the cabin, so people can use it in emergencies, but also they have a number they can give out just in case. They
Do people even know how to use Nokia anymore?
Usually people manage, but the map is a bit more of a challenge for people. But I think we're just about at a stage now where people can kind of remember it from their childhood. We're starting to get a few younger guests coming through, probably don't have quite such an idea of what it is, so we might have to start putting instruction manuals in there. But I think that's it. It's like, one of the biggest insights we get from guests is like, after 3 days, you realise that the world doesn't end when you're just not that important. I'm not that important, and same with the people who come and stay.
So let's go back to the beginning then. You came back from the Himalayas, you were inspired by this notion of locking your phones away. Why this business model? And I guess it was right on that cusp of, actually, you started it in the pandemic, didn't you?
Yes.
Although the idea may have been fructifying for a while before that.
Yeah, exactly. So we ordered our first cabin a month before the pandemic hit. So, we launched just after the first lockdown. So a few challenges with that. I think why this business model? One of the big insights, I did lots of things wrong at our previous startups. I was running growth in the final year, and we ended up slightly capitulating at the end of that year. So I clearly wasn't doing a very good job. And one of the insights, much of it was due to my incompetence, but also
You're very humble.
We just didn't have anything special about it. So we didn't do anything that well. We were trying to feature match against competitors, and we really just didn't stick in our lane. And so that made my job even harder. Because I think products can sell themselves and they can not sell themselves. So that experience was scarred into my mind. And then cabins are interesting for a couple of reasons. So we'd heard about cabins, thinking a lot about digital detoxing, heard about cabins. Cabins are interesting. It's a good business model. So it's very efficient return on capital. And again, they also have sex appeal. So kind of like Tesla with electric cars, like if you really want to affect change, you have to make it sexy in this day and age.
Without question.
So I'd love to say I sat down with Ben and we did an amazing market analysis and, crunched the numbers and figured it out. But it was actually like, again, it just kind of popped up and it was like, what about this? Spent 3 hours Googling cabins on a Friday night, and we're like, yeah, that'll probably work, and quit the job on Monday. So it was, we stumbled into it. Lots of things have worked out that we didn't think about. And so over time, I think we got very fortunate.
So kicking off in the midst of a pandemic, early doors, but the writing was on the wall that travel was going to be a challenge, and yet what you'd built or what you were putting together was an escape, a travel business.
Quite, yeah. So I think there's opportunities in every obstacle, and a few things. On the surface, it was bad for the business. We had, we were trying to raise a small friends and family round. We had investors dropping out. We had our first site dropped out where we were going to put the cabin. So there was certainly lots of change.
Yeah.
But then actually, when the dust settled, we realized that, this is exactly what people want to be doing because they've just spent 3 months locked in a flat in London. And actually, no one's going to be flying.
Yeah.
So the year after, in 2021, was like the summer of staycations, and everyone was absolutely desperate to get out into the English countryside, and there we were sitting on a few cabins out there. So it was a real tailwind. And the other big thing was on the PR side of things. So we tried to do a bit of PR in the early days, never got anywhere with it. But the inbound PR was just unbelievable. Like we just got every publication, all sorts of people getting in touch through no genius of our own. Again, we just stumbled into the right idea at the right time. So there were lots of advantages. I think, strengths and things can be strengths and weaknesses. So that perhaps affected us a little further down the line where we maybe didn't develop some of the marketing muscles that we needed to. So the year after that was more challenging because we kind of just rode this wave. You saw so many businesses, so many big businesses had amazing pandemics and then just this huge correction. We had that on a very kind of small scale. So that year was a slog, but then we really, again, going through that hardship, you have to develop the muscles and you come out much stronger on the other side. So I think it's, good fortune can be a blessing and a curse, and tough times can be a blessing and a curse.
So, being a maths grad, when you were doing those initial numbers, what was the metrics that you'd built the business around?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think,
and the growth rates that you were anticipating.
I probably borrowed more from my previous startup experience than my maths grad experience, and the big learning there is humans are terrible at forecasting, and so don't hold too much sway in the numbers.
Yeah, spreadsheets are easily
exactly.
They can double your money overnight.
Yeah, exactly. So you can make a spreadsheet say anything. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it usually doesn't. So I think and again, I got a lot of stuff wrong with the numbers in the early days of Unplugged. Like I definitely was probably a little bit too laissez-faire on the cash flow management side of things, which made for a few slightly uncomfortable spots. So lessons learned there. But I think I'm very much an advocate of back of napkin calculations when you're dealing with businesses, because there are so many variables, so much unknowns, and we're just not good at. I think if you try and quantify the complexity, you just end up making mistakes. I think there's a good saying that it's better to have an approximate answer to the right question than an exact answer to the wrong question.
I think that's a great bit of advice.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant piece of advice. So that will be highlighted when we put this out. Yeah. And then as you move forward now, you've got a few more data points, you've got a number of assets out there. How do you gauge how the business is going at the moment? There's the North Star metric, which I'll get your answer on in a minute, but what are the other gauges? How do you assess where things are for you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's a couple of side of things. There's the numbers side of things, and it's all about it's all about the numbers we know, kind of revenue, margin, all that kind of thing. So you've got to be good on those numbers. And the other huge element of a business, perhaps the biggest one, is the group of people. A company is just a group of people working towards a shared goal. And I think the health of that group of people is everything. Like, we really got the culture wrong at my previous startup, and it just makes everything 10 times harder. And it's very hard. Once you've lost the culture, it's very hard to get it back.
What were the 2 or 3 pieces of wisdom and culture that you brought in that you feel that have been right? And did you make more mistakes as well this time around, or?
I think we've done well there. Again, there's different parts, so obviously we have made some mistakes, always do. I think one of the things that have been really, really keen to do is create psychological safety. Like that's what went wrong at the last place. Like as soon as you people start to feel not safe, then they start hiding mistakes. And fundamentally, if something goes wrong, it's not about whose fault is it. It's about like, okay, well, how do we solve it? And it's about what's right rather than who's right. So I think that is big. So I've never blamed anyone for anything that happens at the company. It's
a learning opportunity.
Yeah, and I actually blame myself for everything. Yeah, not in a self-loathing way, but just a way of like, I could have given that person a bit more information.
What did I do that could have made it different?
Yeah, because what it does, it takes all the stress out of the situation. Because whenever we're angry, and so much of being a founder, I think, is managing your own psychology. And when you lose your head, it's because stuff is out of your control. And like in the early days, I've definitely kind of as you get calmer over time as you learn and see what's happening. And at the early days, when we had our first cabin, like I remember it getting delayed by a month, and that felt like really stressful. And in hindsight, no one cares. It made no difference at all. And it was that kind of like, I was feeling frustrated with the cabin supplier that there was a delay, but actually that frustration was nothing to do with them. It was that I still hadn't raised the money, and the fact the cabin was going to be delayed would make that harder. And so it was like I was failing, and so then when a mistake happens, you're more blaming it on other people. But it's like, what's actually happened here is I haven't done my job well enough yet. And I think that's at the root of all frustration, all anger, is that insecurity of like, I have not done my thing,
Again, more great wisdom worth taking note, because I think it's a very mature place to be, where you recognise, what could I have done differently to avoid this thing. But I think we do put stresses on ourselves by creating expectations, whether it's investors and how will this look with the investors or whatever. But I think sometimes we need to take a little bit of reflection. Let's just do a bit of a mix-up now, detoxing and that space that we just talked about the founder and the role of, what could I have done differently. If you're detoxers, how often would you recommend that folk detox before we get into the founder piece of it?
I would recommend a bit more than feels comfortable. So I think we all feel like we can't take time off. Just take a little bit more time off and see what happens. I think you start small. Again, like some people just don't spend any time offline. It might just be going for a half an hour walk and leaving your phone at home. But I think it's a really healthy thing for a founder to step away from a business for a few days, for yourself and for the company. I think when the company is too dependent on you, then you become the bottleneck and actually end up making a lot of decisions that you're probably not the best person to make those decisions. So by extracting yourself for a few days, the company kind of learns to work without you. And I think what you were saying before, the call is great, where your role nowadays is just to support those people in their roles. And they don't need support all the time, right? Like nothing is ever that urgent, really. I think I'm sure some people will challenge me on that, but I'm not so sure. And the other big one is just letting yourself recharge, right? Because it's about how you turn up. I'm not a believer, like our work day is now designed from an industrial age when you'd be making widgets, and obviously in 8 hours you can make twice as many widgets you can make in 4 hours. Our kind of mental performance varies massively throughout the day. Like there's a great book called When by Daniel Pink on it, and you have this kind of peak in the morning, you crash in the afternoon, and then little peak in the evening, and that differs for everyone. Some people really not morning people, etc. But I think it's about listening to that, and fundamentally, so much of your job as a founder is making decisions. I think some decisions are super important. You need to make the right decision. Some of them you just need a decision, which again you do need to be a little bit present. But the quality of the decisions, I think we don't optimize enough for that. And I think the other big thing is, everything's not equal. So throughout your day, you might have one very important meeting with, the perfect investor, and the rest of the day you've got tedious meetings. I would just cancel all of that other stuff so you can turn up better for that one meeting. Maybe that's a bit too extreme, but I think it's a lot about how do you turn up better for the really important things. And the other thing I think is how you turn up as a founder massively affects the team. If you are kind of sweating stress, anxiety, people pick up on that. It affects their jobs. And then they're not doing as well a job. If you can come in and just be a calm, supportive presence, which again is looking after yourself. And again, it needs to be, to make a startup successful, it needs to be the thing, and it's very hard, etc. But I just don't believe that 14, 15-hour days are healthy. And I'm a big believer. I was telling you beforehand, whenever I'm really busy and putting in the long shifts, I'm much less effective. And again, it comes back to a place of insecurity. It's because I know that I'm not doing a job at something, so I try and overcompensate by just being busy. But like most work we do, when I was running growth that last year, and obviously it's different being a founder, but 95% of what I did was just garbage. Like you could have taken all of that away and the company wouldn't have been any different. And I think even now...
That's another insight. I guess that piece about how important, maybe it's a personal thing, you just want to feel important.
100%.
And part of the detox is that detoxification of that perception.
Yeah.
Because it's, I guess as males, that toxic masculinity piece may well come into it as well, around that importance of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think one advantage I have is that I've seen myself fail and mess up so much, and I'm very aware of my infallibility. So it means I have a very easy time delegating and trusting people, and not kind of giving them a hard time if it's not up to a particular level, because I've probably would have done a rubbish job of that as well. And then it's like, okay, well, how can we improve this, and what do we need here to make this a success? So I think it's people just have this kind of very high expectation, very high ego, as you say, that then causes a lot of issues. But I think if you zoom out and if you look back at what's actually happened, like so much of our time is wasted, so much of it's ineffective. Startups going completely the wrong direction for 3 or 4 years, and then realize we should have been doing that other thing. If you'd gone and stayed at a cabin 3 years ago, you might have had that insight.
Well, there you go. I mean, tell me more about the business model of the cabin, because I think what you've just said is just made me think maybe we need to do a bit more of this for ourselves and for our team. But so tell me about the business model for the cabin. Do you have loads of corporates? Is it loads of individuals? How does it work?
For sure. So it's mostly consumer. We have a few corporates, which has kind of happened really nice and organically, but fundamentally we're a consumer brand. We own and operate our own cabins, working with landowners on a revenue share. Actually, over time, the way I see that going is what the big hotel chains did, because in many ways we're a hospitality business, is they built and owned their own properties in the early days, really made sure it was built a strong brand,
bring the model,
that quality. And then over time, they moved towards more of an asset-light model where they just focus on acquisition and loyalty, and I probably see us go towards that over time. So fundamentally, we are, all of our bookings are direct, and mostly through social media, ironically, various channels like that. Influence is a great channel for us. And then we had a few businesses get in touch last year, just ask if they could offer this as an employee benefit. So we've had a whole bunch of different approaches with that, but some people buy each of their employees a stay a year. Some people buy gift cards and give them out, as people hit anniversaries, something like that. So it's really nice to see that out in the world, and it feels like we're starting to become...
Actually, that's a real nice idea. You might even
there you go.
Try that ourselves.
Absolutely. But I think it's nice to see it's kind of becoming synonymous, like Uber is with taxi, and obviously we're much, much earlier on our journey, but it's kind of coming synonymous with spending a few days offline in nature. It's like, I'm just going to go and be unplugged this weekend. Exactly. So it feels like we are getting there in terms of building that brand awareness, especially in London, but also in the UK.
So how, going back to the brand awareness, and I guess it's a brand that's the thing that survives, but how easy do you see it as for other people to emulate or copy you? And is that good or bad from your perspective?
Yeah, it's not a concern. I think there's a good Paul Graham tweet, which I think every founder should read, which is 99% of startups fail because they fail to execute rather than competition, and yet we spend so much time worrying about the competition or something along those lines. And I think that is it, right? Like it's a hard business to execute in many ways. Like there's lots of different areas we need to become experts in, and that's the thing. Like it's been a real slog to get here. I think we've made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot. but it's it's not something that someone's going to whip up tomorrow with the same brand presence, etc. So for us, we're only competing with ourselves. I think we want to be aware of what's happening in the market. I think there'll be a bit of a roll up. So there are other cabin concepts. They've all steered away from digital detox, but there are lots of other cabins out there, and I think there will be a bit of a roll up. So if we can just keep running our doing what we're doing, then there'll be big opportunities to go out there and actually acquire other businesses and build a portfolio that way. So I think it will get really interesting. Like, I really enjoy, in the early days, me and Ben were cleaning the cabin and all that kind of stuff, and it's fun, but it's not the stuff that really kind of stimulates me. So as we start to get to
but
this,
at least you know what the ground level work and activity is. You
It's
know
important
the business inside out.
And I think the other point there is, I think you have to stay paranoid and be trying to disrupt yourself, right?
Yeah.
So always have to be questioning, are we doing the right thing, right? It's kind of a tricky paradox, because on one hand, focus and do one thing really well. On the other hand, how do you keep evolving? How do you keep innovating? How do you keep...
And just because you don't want to be disrupted doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going to come and disrupt
exactly.
you if you're not on top of it. Let's go back then to the piece about your North Star. What is your North Star?
That's a good question. I don't think we have it as figured out as we should. So, fundamentally, we want to get people digital detoxing in nature. We want to get people offline and into nature. As to, we don't have hey, we need to get to 10,000 cabins in the next 6 years. I think kind of taking it very quarter by quarter, month by month. It's about how do we fill our cabins. Nice simple thing. It's kind of like an airline where
you get 90% plus occupancy, which is pretty damn good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty simple there. I think I probably subscribe a bit more to that. Having a really strong North Star mission is super important. It's something we need to figure out at some point. But I do think there's this thing of focusing on systems rather than goals, and just as long as we're doing the right things internally, I think we have a very strong sense of what we're doing and why, that we're trying to get people offline into nature for them, so that they can reconnect with themselves and they can turn up happier and healthier into the world. And so I think that's enough for where we are now. Could we be running a tighter ship? Absolutely, and it's high on the agenda. But yeah, I think what we've really focused on is occupancy, because it's nice and simple. Occupancy. So can we get people staying, and can we get them having a great time?
Yeah.
So post-day surveys and how many 10 out of 10s can we get? Not so interested in the 9s, but let's get some 10 out of 10s. We don't want to talk about.
But I guess the 9s are learning opportunities, are they not?
Big learning opportunities. Exactly, but in terms of North Star, it's let's get people staying. Let's get 10 out of 10. This was life changing.
So again, going back to what you were just saying there about we don't have this notion of having 60,000 cabins in year Y or X. But are you not mindful that if you don't move that forward, because it's a great idea, because it's got loads of compelling arguments towards it, and for every cabin there's probably 1,000 entrepreneurs and founders out there who could benefit from them, or indeed other people, just anybody. I mean, it's not just for founders. We're just talking about founder metrics ourselves, but I think it sounds like a proposition that most people could benefit from. So, such a good idea. There will be other people with a pace. Do you have a concern around that, just in terms of your own team, the business?
Yeah, well, I think we want to always be pushing ourselves, and there is a real urgency to grow. And the good thing is that it's quite a nice forcing function where just ordering more cabins, you then got to fill them, you got to deploy them, etc. But what I don't want to do, also talking about the kind of innovating, is draw a line in the sand of, hey, in 5 years we want to have 20,000 cabins, because I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. And you look at Soho House, which actually I see us going more towards that kind of a play rather than let's just get exactly the same cabin everywhere in the world. They have just it's developed over time, and they built a huge business. They've done it faster, yes, but they built an amazing business and a very unique business. I think that's what we want to do here, and that's one of the other reasons I'm not worried about competition. For example, there are some very big cabin companies in the space. There's one in the US who have over 1,000 cabins, and they've got private equity backing now. They've raised tens of millions, and then it's just a rollout play, right? So we've got a concept, let's roll it out. It's all about, you know, the numbers, the margin, etc. And, you know, we need to be doing all those things, like, you know, devil's in the detail. Like, we need to be hot on our numbers, you know, really build a strong business. But I also want to leave enough flexibility in the system so that we can, you know, go with the flow and innovate and explore these new opportunities. Yeah, exactly. Because you know, I think there's a real opportunity to create something really special here, and I don't want to be like, okay, well, now we've got to the point where to attract a larger audience, we need to drop the phones thing and let's just go and build a cabin business, and then we can go to caravan parks, and you know, that's not interesting.
That's not
right?
what you're trying to do.
Exactly. So I think you need to have enough. I spoke to a very good friend of mine who's a fantastic entrepreneur, and he's ex-Bain. It runs a very tight ship, and he was saying to me that, you know, for all the things he does incredibly well, he sometimes finds it a bit hard to have that innovation because everything's so tight and so kind of mapped out. And I think there's a balance. You know, you need to leave that flexibility in the system, so you can make these leaps.
And so, how big's the business now?
So we're at 20 cabins.
Humans
across the UK. Staff. Yeah. So we have 11 people. 6 of those in the UK and 5 of those remote.
So you're a big advocate for detoxing yourself. Do you have any metrics or gauge for how your own team are doing on that front, and how are you encouraging them to detox?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're at a size now where you know, you're going to know you're talking to everyone face to face. So I think we don't have those systems in place yet. We'll need to as we grow. So I think, you know, one of the jobs that I see myself having is just always having my finger on the pulse of how everyone else is feeling. And I think you lead by example. If you're taking time off and unplugging, etc., then it encourages other people to do it. Some people like doing it more than others. Yeah, quite a lot of people.
Or is it just hypothetical?
No. I mean, you know, people stay in our cabins whenever they want. Like, really encourage people to take holidays. Some people take more holidays than others. My co-founder doesn't take many holidays. So, you know, I'll just always, you know, it's in the little moments. It's when someone's kind of hinting they might want to go on holiday, do you as a leader say, that's a great idea, you should please go and do that? Or do they say, oh yeah, but there's this, you know, project coming up? And so I think it's in those little moments, like, people really respond to how you react as a leader. So it's just prioritizing it. And, you know, you need to you need to put that into metrics and systems as you grow as a company, but we're not quite there yet. It's harder to do with the remote team. I think that's something, steep learning curve for me, and I think something we haven't quite figured out yet, which is, it's very easy with the people in London, very easy, but it's easier, right? You're sitting around the table with people, you get a lot of face time. It's harder with the remote team, and so I think learning on that and that.
But you started remote because you were in the middle of lockdown essentially, and yes, you had your co-founder, but there wasn't a whole squad of folk that you'd gathered around you beforehand, so effectively it was remote, was it not?
Fairly remote, although we got most of our work done. We'd meet up at a Weatherspoons when they weren't closed once a week, Monday morning, all these blokes in England shirts sipping pints, and you know, and that's when we got most of the kind of thinking done, and then we'd go off, and we work very differently, which has worked really well. So it's always been like fairly hybrid. And again, now we do Monday, Friday in the office. Some people come in the other days, and that's when a lot of the conversations and, you know, slightly more strategic stuff happens, and then people go away in the week and do the work. So I think what I find difficult about fully remote and about people in other countries is it's just much harder to build empathy or you know, show empathy, have empathy when you're talking to someone over Zoom, you know, and just gauge how they really are, you know. And so I think that, because fundamentally someone said to me the other day, one of our advisors, that your job as the CEO is to, if you imagine the company as an organism, to always be kind of assessing how healthy that organism is, and anytime something's unhealthy, so someone's feeling, you know, resentful or frustrated, then you need to go in and sort that out. And that's hardest to do with remote for sure. I think part of the thinking there is actually just to get more FaceTime with those remote people as well. It isn't always possible. But yeah.
No, I mean, we're a fully remote business.
Right.
We started life over in Moorgate, you know, WeWork. But literally just before COVID hit, 2018, we went to remote first, as it were, and then slowly got progressively more unhinged from the unplugged from the office, such that by end of February 2020, we relinquished
Interesting.
the office altogether, having downscaled
Yeah.
it quite considerably. And we now, I think that point that you've made, a couple of points actually. Firstly, around the role of making sure you understand how people are feeling and
Yeah.
helping them be in the right place. That's an important thing. We do that through surveys, but we also do twice a week we have stand-ups where everybody everybody comes to those each week. We have retros, we have retreats twice a
Really
year
amazing.
where people, we've got folk in India, we've got folk in Edinburgh, we've got people down in Exeter. It's a very well distributed bunch, but we make that investment
Yeah.
of bringing people together so they actually get to meet and interact. And yes, it's not going to be quite the same as being in the same office, but on the same point, we wouldn't be able to have this cluster of talent that we have had we been just remaining in Moorgate, I guess. So it's a balance, but it's interesting to make sure that I keep on board with that message of making sure of the health, the pulse of folk and our key function. So thank you for that one. So where's the future, Hector? Tell me what the next 6 to 12 months look like for you, and how you'll gauge whether that's the right thing to be pursuing, or you need to edit to go with the flow because the flow's not working.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've changed my mind on this recently. So I think a couple of things I want to prioritize now is, one is just building a great company. And to me, that's building a great group of people, who are excited and, work well together and are great at what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you create something really special. Again, we still want to have that urgency to grow, and, I think we're only going to accelerate from here. And the other one is just to focus on myself and, get myself in. There's a good analogy of chess where up until, I think, sometime in the 19th century, chess was played. You'd always be trying to guess what your opponent was going to do a few moves ahead. And then someone came along and just took a completely different approach and invented something called positional chess, which all the top players in the world use now, which is where if you just focus on your position and getting yourself in the strongest possible place, then opportunities will come up. And I think that is really where I'm increasingly looking. So have massively upped the amount of meditation I'm doing again. I was like,
wow,
how can you take the time out, but actually turn up so much better for the rest of the day, right? And
so did you just tell me, like, to stop you there, but how much a meditation is the right level? How much do you use it on a daily basis, weekly basis?
Yeah, well, I think meditation, whatever you can do that's daily is really important. And it's also like, it shouldn't feel like a chore. So again, the problem is someone tries it once and it is, perhaps interesting, they get some good effects, but it feels like a chore and it quickly falls away, and then they've got in their mind, I can't meditate. So I think it has to happen quite nice and organically. So for me, I've got quite fortunate over the last few years. Started with Headspace, was doing that 10 minutes a day. Some months were good, some months weren't so good, and then heard about something called transcendental meditation, which is 20 minutes twice a day. Did a TM course in 2019. That really stuck. So for the last few years, I've been doing that. Always did the morning session, afternoon session, sometimes would, sometimes wouldn't. So I was probably doing about half an hour a day. And then recently started doing more kind of mindfulness meditations of focusing on the breath.
Yeah.
And that has just kind of grown organically. So now I'm doing about an hour and a half a day, 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes in the evening. And it has made a huge difference. It's like, even compared to what I was doing before, it's like a completely new kind of effect. So that has been, and I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I've turned up much better as a result, and better things are happening. Like life starts to just work towards you much more. So, and I look at the tougher periods, and it's always, these kind of things always fall away, right? And then you potentially aren't, because we create a lot of our own problems. Like, a lot of something will happen, but then it's like how you respond to that then creates either a massive problem with this, and again, like, how quickly did you pick up on this, that this was going to be a problem. And so I'm massively thinking about kind of just working myself so I can be there for everyone else, right? Like, I can be there for all the people in my life, whether it's at work or at home. And then last of all, I think on the business side of things, I read a good book recently, which was the biography of Che Guevara. Just
Yeah.
just a fun little bit of revolutionary.
Hence the beard.
Exactly. I'm trying to. Yeah. I don't think I have anything on Che, but cautionary tale, of course. But he was probably the most famous revolutionary, and I think every startup you're trying to build a revolution. So just thought it'd be interesting. And one of the phrases he mentions from the French Revolution is that the key to a good revolution is audacity, audacity, audacity. So I think that is where my mind is at for the next couple of years for the business. It's like, I think we built something really interesting now. I think we're having a really positive effect on society and have built a great brand presence. But how can we really up the game and bring more audacity to what we're doing? So
I think that's a brilliant point on which to conclude. I'm definitely going to take away some of that audacious boldness that you've described, along with the importance of being present for people and the different ways in which we can help ourselves to be that. There are lots of different metrics that we can look at, but I think one that many founders fail to gauge too much is their own well-being, and that is a key metric that I think from this session with you, Hector, has just lifted in importance in my own mind. So thank you so much, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Not at all. No, really, such a pleasure to meet and be here, and it's really been a joy. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Founder Metrics. Remember, even the biggest of ambitions are within your reach when you leverage the right strategies and metrics. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and never miss a future episode. You can visit vested.com, Founder Metrics, for additional resources, articles, and exclusive content. Join our growing community of entrepreneurs and founders by following us on LinkedIn or X. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Together, let's continue to unlock the metrics of success, sharing, and create a brighter future.